Hello to you newcomers and welcome back, my lovely subscribers. This is Big Baby Props, and I'm the Big Baby. Today I've got something special for you guys, the Sith Trooper blaster from the upcoming film, Rise of Skywalker. I'll be showing you guys exactly how I made this blaster and how you can as well. I also made the Sith Trooper helmet, so be sure and check out that video as well if you haven't already. With that said, let's get right into it. This blaster is going to start as a raw 3D print. I'll be sure to link the files I used in the description if you have a 3D printer. If you don't have a 3D printer, I highly suggest you do if you're interested in these kinds of videos, but I also sell the raw 3D print we're starting with in my shop online, so be sure and check the description for that as well. I also want to note that since the movie isn't out yet, there's still a lot of unknowns about the blaster and helmet, but I'm constantly updating the files I use and sell as they become available, so if you see a different blaster for sale than the one in the video, that is why. After we've got all the pieces off the print bed, the first thing we're going to want to do is assemble the blaster. For that, we're going to be using a piece of sandpaper glued to a flat wooden board. We're going to sand the ends of the blaster, which need to be glued together. This is going to make the seam between the parts smoother and also help the super glue we're using to bond faster. After it's all assembled, we're going to need to fill in the 3D printer lines before we start painting. The first step in that process is using a material called Rust-Oleum Filler Primer. Links to all these materials can be found in the description, by the way. Filler Primer is going to do a great job filling in a lot of the smaller print lines along the sides and especially in the hard to reach areas. I typically apply 2 to 3 heavy coats of Filler Primer before moving on to the next print line filling material. The other material we're going to be using is called Bondo Spot Putty. If you're experienced in the prop making world, you probably know how this stuff works, but if not, it's like a red toothpaste material that hardens when it's exposed to air. Once it's hardened, we can sand it down to a smooth surface. I'm going to use Bondo on a few spots around the blaster, but especially on the seam lines between the glued together pieces. This will end up making the blaster look like one uniform piece and will really bring it all together. Once all the seams are bondoed up, we're ready to begin sanding. For sanding, I like to use a 150 grit sandpaper pad to start with, and then move up to 300 grit for a smoother finish. After my first run through of sanding, I'll be sure and get all the Bondo sanded down and maybe a little bit of the Filler Primer. But after that, I'm going to apply another layer of Filler Primer as a kind of like final coat. Then I'll repeat the process with the 150 and then 300 grit sandpaper to make sure I have a smooth surface ready for painting. If it takes you a few rounds of Filler Primer, Bondo, and sanding, that is perfectly fine and kind of expected. You can take this process as long or as short as you want it to. But this is going to be probably the most intense part of the process, so if you can make it through this, you're well on your way to a beautiful looking blaster. Once the blaster is sanded down to our satisfaction, we can begin painting. Luckily for us, there's not a real complex paint scheme here, so we're going to start with a base coat of black. I don't want the whole blaster to be glossy like the helmet was, so we're going to paint with a flat matte black and leave it at that. Next, we're going to want to paint the red and silver details of the blaster. For that, we're going to need to tape down some areas so we're not just painting crazy. I like to use the thin masking tape for some of the smaller details and a thicker blue tape for coverage to protect the rest of the blaster from any stray paint sprays. We're going to use the same gloss red we used on the helmet to make sure they're matching and start laying down some paint. Since this paint is a gloss, you want to do lighter coats since it's a bit of a thicker paint. Here I rushed it a bit too much and I had some paint ooze underneath the tape and I had to fix it later. So don't be like me and take your time. After the red gloss is dried, we can remove the tape and begin taping for the silver. The silver is going to follow the same pattern as the red, so we're just going to skip ahead to the end. There you go guys, that is how I made my blaster. I'm really happy with how it came out. I think it's the perfect companion to the helmet we made, and they look great together. I really want to wear the helmet to the theater for the premiere of Rise of Skywalker, but sadly, I think I'm going to have to leave the blaster at home. Thank you all for watching. I hope you guys are as excited for Rise of Skywalker as I am. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, I hope to see you again in the next video.